Welcome back to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalvarowski, and finally, I'm back set up with the boom mic, and we're all set. For folks out there, I left the other boom in a rental car in Costa Rica. Actually, we still have it, or they have it. So we'll be getting that back in about 6 weeks. But now we're set up again in Edmonton, so we're rolling full steam. Susan, how are you doing today?
I am excellent, but I'm just dying to know how this contrasting experience is playing out in yours. How is it being back north of the border from the jungles of Costa Rica? What's that freaking contrast like?
It's cold. Yeah.
Besides the obvious.
Well, besides the teacher,
Right?
how's the change been?
Yeah, I mean, we've been back since, I guess we flew to Calgary on the 14th. We drove up here yesterday, or no, 3 days ago we flew in. We drove to Edmonton yesterday from Calgary, and then now we're sort of set up in an Airbnb for another 2 weeks. Energy is a lot different. And then the other thing that we noticed was like, your mind starts slipping back into some old patterns. Like literally my wife and I, we went to Costco, and it's like, since we moved to Costa Rica, our diet's wildly different. And I'm walking around going like, oh, I used to eat this. Like, and then your brain's like, wait, we don't do that anymore. And so it's something for folks out there, right? Is like, as you grow and change, it's also important to change your environment, because that's going to stimulate and kind of cement those changes into your brain. And so like for me, Costa Rica is very much less intense energy wise. Like every morning I go out for a run in the sunshine, I see mountains and valleys, and it's beautiful. And it's like when you get back into, where you used to live or where you used to be, and literally down the street is where I used to work 5 years ago. So it's like sometimes you have those old patterns, and you just have to be more aware and more mindful of this.
Yeah, that's what they say, right? Like all those primers left, right, and center in your old environment. You must be waking up some of those old choices that you used to make. But isn't it an amazing experience for you to come back and really sink into the changes? Like since you left Edmonton a year ago and moved down there, like, yeah, it must be really hitting you, just all of the significant shifts that you've been able to make.
The interesting part, right, was I hadn't been in this neighborhood in 5 years. Like I literally got laid off from that job about 5 years ago to like around 2-3 days from now. And I drove through and I was like, they're still the same. And I am massively different.
And I am not.
That is one of my favorite. That is one of my favorite things.
That.
As I work with people who are going through transitions, I tell them you just don't even know the adventure and the possibility on the other side of this. And really, it's somebody, I heard a great saying, when one door closes, another door opens, but the hallway is hell. And I never heard but the hallway is hell part before. And I thought that is so true. The transition is so tough, but the other doors don't open to similar structures. So, Rob, I can't wait to hear more as you unpack this in coming weeks.
It's fun. So, yeah, but always the self-work continues. So I had a treatment session yesterday. I'm going to therapy tomorrow. It's very much really good to integrate, and it's also part of what I've been working on for the last little while. However, we have to start our show off with a quote and get to that wonderful voice that you all hear, our special guest this week. So I have a quote here from Lao Tzu, and he says, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom."
Tell us why you chose that one today, sir.
And it's part of what we just talked about, and part of what we're all on this journey to find is as we start to evolve, we need to catch our self-concept up with who we are. And it's moments like, going by your old office and seeing the building has literally not changed at all. And like basically the neighborhood hasn't really changed much. And being like, oh, they're there. And like, I've moved to Costa Rica and I got married and I bought a dog and I did a TED Talk and we've done 160 episodes of the show and we've coached leaders and Olympic gold medalists and Miss Canada and all these things, right? And it's like, that's where you can start to see that. And as high achievers, we often forget to do that. And that's why we talk a lot about banking wins and looking back. And so I just want to leave that for folks. Of course, we heard our special guest a little bit, and our special guest today, technology change leader, global tech leader and advisor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of The Modern Manager Mentor, Christine Sandman Stone's with us. Christine, how are you?
Woohoo!
Lovely, thank you.
So, Christine, of course, we heard a little bit about your opinions on me, but I would love your thoughts on the quote.
That's a timely question. So my oldest child is in her 30s, and we got to see her this past weekend. We traveled and ended up drinking hot chocolate after ice skating, and hanging out and chatting. And we were chatting about our 30s in general. And she talked about how much she was enjoying having some of the noise of her 20s behind her. And she really felt that she was building on lessons as opposed to being in the throes of lessons. So I agree with the knowing of self. As a leader, it helps you make those subtle adjustments that make you effective to all of those around you. It keeps you aware of where you're thriving and where you're starting to struggle. Before we started this call, I noted that my hair is damp today. It's because I noticed that my energy was low and I realized I hadn't been working out as much. So I got a workout in before the call and a shower too. So I think that the more we know ourselves, the more effective we can be to others, but also the more effective we can be about managing our own growth and evolution. And it keeps going in every single decade. So we were able to chat with her about the different decades of our lives and how we perceived them and what we thought is ahead for her. And it's fun to talk about those things.
I'm curious when that journey towards wisdom started for you. You're there talking to your daughter this weekend, right? She's building on lessons from her 20s. As a leader and a leadership expert, when do you actually remember starting to awaken to that journey within?
College. In college, my father told me, study what you love, it'll all work out. And I believed him and started studying philosophy, which was deeply interesting to me, especially logic, formal logic. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get a job. Changed my mind. Ended up coming back to philosophy. But in those moments of deep learning, I just fell in love with education. And I hadn't had great schools when I was growing up. And college was my first exposure to smart people and discourse and things that really stretched my brain. And it helped me figure out how smart I really was and then how I could use that intellect creatively. And so college was the first time that I was like, man, I'm in a state of flow in these classes. Like I am excelling, I'm interested, I'm building. And that was addictive. And so I realized my father was right. My dad says 3 stages of life, right? Your father knows everything. Your father doesn't know anything. Your dad was really smart. And so my dad was really smart phase. Yeah. And he was right. And it set up a life, and it continues, of paying attention to where I lock in, where I resonate, where I get smarter, where I can help other people get smarter. So I think college for me, I think before then, I was completely unaware, if that makes you feel better.
Don't worry, we all are. Now, Christine, can you tell us a little bit about after college? Like, how did you go from graduation to being a keynote speaker and author of the Modern Manager Mentor book?
Uh, I got that first job after university where everyone just gets the first job, right? It's not perfect, but it's something. And I was writing sales proposals for a person who worked in a company that sold computers. And this was right at the advent of computer networking. When I left university, the only computers used inside of business were mainframes and mid-ranges. And this was the very first evolution of Intel computers being used to network. And I would write his sales proposals, but I was quickly figuring out how things worked. And so I'd reach out, I'd say, I don't think this technically is going to work. Like, I think we missed this part or this connection or this opportunity. And I got pulled into architecting networks and then ultimately data centers, leading projects. I worked for a small company and really built my technical muscle there and knew I wanted the exposure to big companies. So I went to Volkswagen Audi. They have this remarkable management training program. I learned a lot about leading people there for the first time, and I ran big projects. I have 4 kids. So Volkswagen wanted me to move to Detroit. My 4 kids voted no on that one. So we stayed in Chicago. I went to work for Dell. I ran a very large team. And that was one of those funny moments where you get the job and your first week, you're all excited. And then you find out that your team is ranked 33rd of 33 teams in North America.
Oh,
And so thank God for Volkswagen. They gave me all these management tools, and I turned that team around and got us from last to first in 22 months. And it was a lot of
wow.
work. And I learned so much about the power of quarterly goal setting, the power of making myself what each one of my different people needed in order to get the very best out of them. Tough conversations, tough transitions. But that team, the other part about that was that team continued to perform at that level well after I left. So for me, that was another critical lesson in leadership about what you do has to survive you, or you're just making a casual change. You're not actually really doing something that's material and it's going to last. My path ended up taking me to McDonald's, and I ran the first multi-year tech strategy there for North America. I also led my first agile transformation, which is where you lead software developers in this modern way of developing software, completely different than how they would have been trained in their college programs at that time. And I've led multiple agile transformations since then. My last corporate gig was at Groupon, and I love something hard and messy, and man, I got it. I started 2 weeks before the pandemic. I was told before I was hired I was coming into a turnaround situation, and my first job was to help 3,000 software engineers around the globe all change to agile software development. So that's what I started on immediately. And then we went to shelter, and then we were losing like 95% of our business in each country as the COVID would sweep through. So we had to get really scrappy. And the second thing that I implemented at Groupon was objectives and key results, which is this quarterly goal setting where you hyper prioritize work against business goals and measurement. And I piloted it with 3 groups and then led it with the other 22. So we had 25 groups doing this around the globe. And every quarter that we had objectives and key results, we were in the black. Before, we were in the red, and after, we were not in the black anymore when it was stopped. But that was a profound transformation experience for me. I speak all the time about women in technology. I'm passionate about this. I speak about technology planning and strategy. And I would give these talks, and like 4th question in, somebody would say like, I don't understand. Like, could you please explain how you did it with 4 kids? And so the first book that I wrote was about raising kids and elevating your career at the same time. It's called Parent Track. And the second book came from kind of a similar pattern where a 29-year-old technology manager reached out to me and said, I did what you said in the interview when they said, hey, have you managed a team before? I said, yes. She had actually managed a large product team, so they didn't report directly to her. Now she said, good God, like, I need to learn how to be a manager in 3 weeks. So she said, what book do I read? And all I could think of were like these these, visionary books like Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, or the tomes from university, right, about leadership. And those two things she did not need inspiration and she did not need theory. She needed practical stuff. So the two of us, she said, will you coach me? And I started sending her things like, ask your boss these 8 questions before you start. This will get you a quick triage of work underway, what the challenges are, what's going on in the team. Talk to every one of your peers in the first 2 weeks. These are the 8 questions you need to ask them. They're going to help you get like a full view of what's going on in the organization. Here are 12 questions that will help you figure out how your business makes money and what your team's role is in that. Just practical things to help her find her way. And as we worked together, it became, I'm going to grab it here. It became obvious that a book was really forming. And the book is this, The Modern Management Mentor. And the reason I picked it up is because I wanted to show, like, inside its checklist. So there are 50 tools that are highlighted with color. So a tool is something that you can visually pick up quickly. There's a tools index in the back. And the goal is that as someone transitions from being this great individual contributor to being a leader for the first time, that they have tactics that help them start off strong and with a little bit of structure. And that book was a joyous exercise. I'd been speaking for a long while on a lot of things, but that's really become the bulk of what I do now is speaking in workshops. And they're on subjects about career progression or leading teams with success. And I love my work. Thank you for asking.
I'm curious what your perspective is on this. And we might have talked about this on the sidelines when we first connected, but just to bring it so that our crowd can enjoy the answer.
Sure.
What do we think in terms of why you had to go out and create this book in such a gap? We look at all the statistics here in 2024, and Rob and I, we just struggle with this whole notion that the average leader doesn't even receive this type of development opportunity until 10 years in a leadership role on average, or the age of 42. Why is that such a gap here still in 2024?
Wow. I think that one of your questions was, what would I tell your leadership community? And that is, we're all always looking for low hanging fruit. Like, what's something simple that we can do that would drive profitability or outcomes? I'm telling you, it's managers, because management books, management classes, they're almost exactly the same that they were 40 years ago. Same concepts. But our work is completely different than it was 40 years ago. We don't have 5 and 10-year strategies anymore. We have annual strategies with quarterly goals that change when our market changes, our consumer changes. We used to have all of our people in one building co-located, and now we've gotten super creative. And we're like, you know what? I had a brilliant person in Denver, and I've got somebody in Dublin, and I've got somebody in Bangalore. I'm going to put those people together, and we're going to get it done. So our teams are global, they're hybrid, they're flexible. So we've changed the strategy, changed the teams. The manager is the one who brings the teams to the strategy, make sure they get things done. And we've done nothing to modernize that layer. It's a huge, huge opportunity for companies. And it's a low cost to go at solving this.
Right. So why is it continuing to be such a blind spot for our leaders? Like one of the things, Christine, I'm curious for your perspective on this as well, right? Like, we're seeing that is another point of contention and frustration for us as leadership coaches is we're going through all this economic uncertainty. AI is coming. There's so much uncertainty and people are so stressed. And so the first thing that we're really confused about is why does that then lead to us seeing the first place to cut budgeting is around their leadership development and training, including for their managers. Right. So we know that all of this is what you're saying is probably the most important. It's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of driving productivity and profitability, but also just in and around, talent retention in all of this economic uncertainty right now. Yet we're still cutting the funding in this area. Why? Oh, why?
Okay. Number one, nobody gives a shit. nobody gives a shit about talent retention anymore because what I'm hearing from recruiters and from leaders in companies was that during the pandemic, they hired quickly, they paid high salaries, and they did it with ambiguous job titles. So now they have highly paid people with ambiguous job titles and they're not getting results. I'm seeing a lot of people in the job market right now, and it's taking them longer than last year in order to find a place. So I don't think retention is top of mind for many leaders. And I believe it should be, but I don't think it is. And I can see that that's because the market has a lot of talent in it. What they're missing, though, is a profit opportunity. When I was at McDonald's, no matter where you worked inside of the company, you had to get inside of a restaurant to understand how the business was run. And nothing's funnier than a technologist like dropping fries and following a manager for a whole day. It was a terrific learning experience and so important to how I led my technology teams. What I learned was that to staff a McDonald's during a normal lunch, the average number of people on a shift that you need is 21. And that seems like a lot, but there's a lot going on in a restaurant. But if you have an amazing superstar employee and that superstar employee is on the schedule for the lunch, you can drop to 17. So we're a pennies profit business at that point, right? Reducing that many people off of your payroll for a peak period is a huge profit gain. I can confidently tell you from my experience and from data that I watch, a superstar is a direct line to profits. So when you can build those superstars, it directly drives your fiscal outcomes. There's a massive opportunity here for organizations to take the folks they have, reset, and say, this is how we want you to do it, and this is how we want you to be accountable for outcomes of your teams.
Christine,
yeah,
I think you're touching on it there, right? Is that seems like what you mentioned is the strategies from turning those low performing teams into higher performing teams.
Yeah.
Like, can you walk us through that process? Like when you show up on a team or maybe you're listening to this show and you have a team and you're trying, you realize that maybe they're not performing at their best level. Like how do you start transitioning those folks through the goal setting, accountability process to get the outcomes you want?
Another story for you. I gave a talk and a woman in the audience heard me, and it was a Thursday night. And she said, are you available Monday? And I was like, man, I'm catching a flight in the afternoon. And she's like, what about Monday morning? I was like, all right. So she brought me in and I led a workshop for her senior managers who had been part of the organization for 20 and 30 years. They had just had a technology company had a massive layoff, and they had lost 20% of their staff. All of their teams were reshuffled. So good news, they survived. Tough news, the word from leadership is, now that you're here, you have to drive a different level of accountability, because what we did in the past is how we got to this point, and it can't be like that anymore. You've got to change. And what we spent our time talking about that morning were some really specific tactics about how to reset as a leader and get better things out of your team. One of those things was, it's going to sound so simple, one-on-ones. How do you change your weekly one-on-ones with your team so that you start to really hone in on how they predict their work outcomes, how they deliver, whether you've got a clear sense of what's going on in all aspects of the team? So we talked about the questions for the first one-on-one, and then we talked about the questions for the second one-on-one, and how they're a little different, and they help you see when someone, is sandbagging, when they say, oh, I'm going to do 3 things next week and they do 10, or when they say they're going to do 3 things and then they do 3 different things. And then to pause and figure out, like, are there pressures from outside that this person has to deal with that disrupt their prioritization? Are they easily distracted? Did we choose bad things to be a priority for the week? A week is a short period, right? So if things change that much in a week, there's a problem somewhere. It could be so many different things. But the simple act of a structured one-on-one can help a manager start to really get a clear read on people. And they were all pivoting out of this time where they had been these supportive, encouraging managers as their teams navigated through the pandemic and through a lot of challenge. And now they were being asked to change. And I said, well, just tell your teams, like, hey, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to use this new one-on-one. And you don't have to tell them it's because I need you to work more or work harder. It's just a natural, subtle way that you can start to figure out what's really going on. We also talked about, I'm a huge fan of quarterly goals versus annual goals. I believe that I know that any human can change in 90 days. We can say, you need to get better at this, and here are 3 things for you to try, and let's see how it goes. Anybody can get better from a personal development perspective. Also, from a business perspective, 90 days is a perfect amount of time to say, this is the goal, and this is how I'm going to measure it. This is what we're going to try to do to hit it. And we're going to see if our theories pan out. If they pan out, double down and do it again. If they don't, abandon those and do something different. But how often have you seen teams that like flog away at the same bad idea for 6 months or 9 months and then realize, man, we're not going to hit the annual goal? Quarterly is harder work for a leader, but it really sets you up to make adjustments. So those are like 2 simple, let me say this differently, 2 apparently simple things that can help a leader really get a different outcome from their people. Structured one-on-ones, and then this concept of quarterly setting, measurement, and reset.
Let's say you're a manager listening to this interview right now, and you're taking Christine's advice. You're going to set some quarterly goals, and the first 90-day sprint is towards developing your leadership capacity according to the wonderful tips, tools, and strategies in your book. Yep. What would be the top 3 that you would recommend any modern manager who's new to developing themselves because they didn't know they had to, should begin in those first 90 days? Where the biggest priorities lie for somebody who's now ready to go on that journey?
They're equally important. So it's not 1, 2, 3. It's like 3 ones.
Got it.
You've got to both get to know your team and get to know the work. So that like team awareness is so critical. And that's where structured one-on-ones and some of the other checklists come in. Equally important, you have got to understand your business, what your business does, how profit is measured, what the priorities are. Once you figure that out, then you look at your team's work through a completely different lens, and you start to realize, like, yes, I mean, objectively, this sounds important, but it has freaking nothing to do with driving the results from our top 3 customers. So let's set these things aside and instead prioritize the work that drives maybe business with our top 3 customers, because that's this quarter's goal. And the third thing is you've got to build relationships. I've heard it described that the best way to build a relationship is actually through conversation. And so if I say, like, Susan, I love your sweater, or Rob, I really appreciate your insights about returning to this continent, each of those is a little thread. And so in a work situation, when I say thank you, when I say I appreciate what you said, when I say I'd love to get your insight on this, when I start to network with my peers and other people inside of the organization with specific questions, I start to form a fabric, because those threads of the connections start to build a fabric. And the heavier the fabric is, when crisis or conflict is like a rock that goes on top of the fabric. And if there are a lot of threads, the fabric is strong and it'll sustain through. But if the fabric is weak, it just tears. So this building of relationships is a long bet on how we're all going to work together in the future. And it means that these people will help you out when you hit a rough spot, but you also get smarter at the same time. So figure out your team and your work, understand how your company makes money, and then get to know your peers as fast as possible, because those relationships are going to be critical to your success in navigating the the necessary conflict that comes from work and growth.
Amazing. Christine, I'm curious, like obviously you've seen a lot of first-time managers, or you've also been a lot
Ben?
dropped into their teams many times. What are some of the common gaps or mistakes you see when folks are promoted that aren't helping them deliver those great results?
I can speak to this personally. I was an amazing program manager, right? And that's how I got the job, leading program managers. And my assumption, my confidence, and my experience in my best practices driving exceptional outcomes brought me to the improper conclusion that my best practices would be best for everyone. And there's that specifically, like I told my team, you should change how you do your status meetings. You should do them like I do them. This is my best practice. And they pushed back hard. And so I talked to my boss. My boss said, watch and then revisit this in a couple weeks and let's see what happens. So I followed them around. And one person, like this guy, I swear, he bugged the heck out of me because he walked around the office all day with a coffee cup. And he was like, I don't even think he's working. So he's like, come on, let's go. So he starts wandering around the office and he's doing stuff like, Rob, oh my gosh, welcome back from Costa Rica. So great to see you. You look terrific. Hey, I know before you left, you were working on that interface. Like, have you like any updates on that? Oh my gosh, it's done. Cool. Like, when do you think you'll deploy? Like this Thursday or next Thursday? And then the guy would answer and Rob would be like, cool. You got your change request in? Terrific. Great. Thanks. Have a great day, Rob. So glad to see you back again. And he did this to everybody that he walked around to. And I realized, oh my Lord, I'm a hard driving person. And sometimes my teams would say, you are tough. I realized this guy was getting the same depth of detail that I got, but his teams loved him, absolutely loved him. And they didn't even realize that he was basically running a one-on-one status meeting with all of them. I was like, okay, now this is fascinating. So then the next day, I'm going to watch another person, and she does not do weekly status meetings. So, like, in my arrogance, I'm like already making notes, like, doesn't do status meetings. Like, that's going to be fun. And she does this thing. There's in agile software development, there's a thing called a stand. It's a 15-minute meeting that happens every day. She ran something that she called a huddle. This was before agile software development, but it's very similar. It's 15 minutes every morning. Her team met in a hallway at 8:45 for 15 minutes, and they just zipped around the circle, and each of them said what they were going to be working on that day, if they had any problems or questions. And she had her project plan. So every now and then she'd be like, oh, I didn't hear you mention this, and they'd chat about it. And then they'd break by 9, everybody'd go to work. And she did that every day. And her team was like, thank God we don't have stupid status meetings where we're trapped in a room and we're all just going to get to work. Highly efficient, highly productive team. And not only was she getting the same depth of detail that I was getting, she was doing it efficiently, and she uncovered problems faster than I did because she didn't wait a week to hear about something. She heard about it in the moment. And so I went back to my mentor and I said, like, this is what happened. And the mentor said, oh my gosh, then don't inflict your best practices where there isn't a problem. Like, this is a place where you can step back, let people deliver in their own style. The other thing too is like, these folks were joyous. Like, they'd figured out what worked well for their teams. Their teams liked it. Everybody was happy. They were getting a lot done. And had I pushed them to do my way, they would have all been miserable. And so the biggest mistake I think first-time managers make is that we got the job because we're so good and there's evidence about how good we are, but that translates, like, the sister to confidence is arrogance, and that we can be carelessly harmful by assuming that the way that we did things is the way that everyone else should do things. And that is the hardest. Okay, that's one of two hard pivots to make. One is that we have to back off and really start to watch what helps other people get great results. I think the other thing too is that it is very hard. And this is adjacent. It's so hard to stop doing the work and letting other people do it. A lot of us want to keep that phrase, keep our hand in, or be a player coach. It's detrimental to the team, and it's a skill you have to learn.
I'm curious on your perspective of what are the most important skills for us to develop to be prepared to be you're talking about agile software development, to be prepared to be agile leaders in 2024 and beyond. Yeah, we're all very much talking about how all this change is coming, right? So how do we prepare for that?
So I think as you look at AI and the proliferation of data, a great leader has to be great at measurement, but they have to be great at measurement within and understanding the context of it. If a leader can look at data and get the context and then share that context with the organization, it's really inspirational. So the first thing is be great at measurement and the correlation to important aspects of the business. The second thing is they have to be curious, and it can't be casual curiosity. It has to be disciplined curiosity, like consistently seeking out others, consistently paying attention to what's going on around them. Innovation, if you look at the stats, innovation hardly ever comes from the leader. It almost always comes from the people that are close to the work. So unless the leader is curious consistently, routinely, they're going to miss opportunities. So great at measurement and correlation, disciplined curiosity. And I would say the third thing is you have to be able to build leadership teams. There's no way that you can scale. Like, you might be a visionary and you might be brilliant, but the only way you can really scale that is to build brilliant and visionary leaders beneath you. So that's it. Build leadership teams, have a disciplined curiosity, and be great at measurement and correlation.
I love it. Now, Christine,
yeah.
One last big question for you is, if there's anything you could tell our community of leaders, what would that be?
I really do believe that that management is ripe for modernization, and it's an opportunity for all of them right now. If they can take their existing people and get 10%, 3%, maybe 20% more out of them with effective management practices, then that really starts to look fascinating when you look at the company books. So I think that I would tell them management is your low-hanging fruit, and it's really ripe for modernization.
And how about our big question and my favorite one of them all? What do you want your legacy to be? The legacy of all this wonderful work that you're doing in the world to get our managers upskilled and up-leveled in this way.
So I want my legacy to continue. So my legacy thus far has been to impact each of my organizations in a material and measurable way that lasts after I leave it. And that's been my pattern so far. And I want that to continue so that that material and measurable outcome is my legacy, and I want to keep building it.
Amazing. Folks out there, if you want to find more about Christine, you can go to deliveratscale.com. I've also dropped her LinkedIn in the podcast notes as well. And obviously, you have to pick up a copy of The Modern Manager Mentor. Obviously, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but you can also get it off the website. Christine, is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
Oh, that's a good question. This is silly. You can find me on the Kirkus reviews of best books of 2023. That's a fun place. And I do look forward to connecting with people. I love my work and I love chatting about it with folks.
Awesome. Obviously, if you're listening to this show, hit subscribe and drop us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify, and also share the show with the other leaders in your life that want to learn about what we talked about today, about being a new manager, the management skills you need to up-level your team, and more. Susan, is there anything you want to leave our folks with today?
I just think people got to get out and get this book, The Modern Manager Mentor, right? This really helps us close that gap in terms of the leadership development opportunities not being provided. So, yeah, I think everybody out there listening, it's got to get out there and get that book and start working with these exercises.
And it ties this back to the work that you all are doing too. If companies can grow and improve by building their leaders, whether it's through a book or through an impactful coaching discussion, that is such an efficient way to get results in 24. And as we look at places to place bets and spend money, I believe it's placing bets within your organization to get better results out of your folks. And like you said earlier, Susan, there's a human side of this too. Our folks, when we invest in them, they give discretionary effort, and that makes a big impact in our outcomes as well.
When you add value for your people add value for you. It's that simple.
It's that simple. And if you're looking for a community of like-minded leaders to take on your growth mindset and growth leadership journey, head on over to elitehighperformance.com/legacy league. You can 2 months free, and you can join our community. You can get all the resources that we have, the 160 pods that Susan and I have done over the last 3 years or so. You can get all the videos. You can get new content each week. And then also you can interact with other folks that are on the same journey as you and get their support, well, including Susan and my support as well. So definitely do that. elitehighperformance.com/legacy league. 2 months free. For me, where I want to land the plane is where Christine landed it. We've had a lot of guests on this show that have talked about the power of middle management and how hard it is to be a middle manager. The executives, they're looking at the big picture, the financials, the vision. The middle managers are the ones who have to take that and bring it to an actionable thing that somebody on the front line of your business needs to do. And that is an incredibly hard job, especially with the constraints in budget, manpower, resources, all the things that are happening now in 2024. And as we know, middle managers are mostly burnt out and stressed and undertrained. And this is the opportunity. It's investing in those folks because they're the ones who are going to completely up-level your business by creating high-performance teams that hit their goals. So if you're interested in all of that, one is pick up a copy of the Modern Manager Mentor. The other is head on over to elitehighperformance.com. We have programs for aspiring leaders and for middle managers. So check us out there, or you can send me an email, rob@elitehighperformance.com, if you want to talk about that. Christine, it was amazing to have you on the show.
It was lovely to spend my morning with you all. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.